So it was summer, 2013. I was over at a friend's house and they had fallen asleep while we were switching off playing Skyrim on their PS3, which, now that I'm saying it out loud, sounds crazy. Why didn't we just play a multiplayer game or something? Anyways, I wasn't tired at all, but I was getting a little tired of playing Skyrim, so I checked out what other games they had, and Silent Hill for the PS1 caught my eye almost immediately. I was at a point in my life where horror wasn't a thing to be avoided. It was exciting and I was starting to appreciate it more, so I started up the game, and what followed was without a doubt one of the scariest gaming experiences that I have ever had, and also it was a little frustrating because I didn't know where to go and I turned it off and I went to bed. You see, Silent Hill for the PS1, it isn't the scariest game in the world, but its low poly, grainy graphics make it, when played in the right environment, one of the scariest games in the world. But I'm not here to tell you about Silent Hill for the PS1, I mean, that was the only time I've ever played it, so I probably couldn't even if I wanted to. No, I'm here to tell you about something way more cool. The Haunted PS1 demo disc is a free downloadable collection of 25 separate games, all of which have this low poly, grainy art style with a few exceptions of course. And it isn't just a menu with a bunch of game demos, the whole thing is presented as an explorable museum with multiple floors and separate rooms for each game. Before you enter a room, you can read about the game that's in it, check out its content warnings, and try it out by interacting with an object in the room, which starts the demo for the game that you chose. It's an incredible effort by an amazing community of developers, and I made a point to play every single one of them. Some of them are arcadey, some of them deal with heavy topics, and some of them are just absolutely insane. So let's talk about them, in no specific order. Walk is a third-person hide-from-the-scary-thing horror game, and it's pretty intense. You start the game as this girl walking home from school, and on your way home you see some money on the ground, and then this happens. The main game has you maneuvering around this demon who can hear your footsteps pretty well, so if you run, he'll start picking up where you're at, but if you walk, he probably won't, as long as he doesn't see you. The gameplay of this one is pretty tough, but I think it has more to do with my impatience than anything. Your character does walk super slow, so while I was exploring the game world, I just wanted to run. But that doesn't mean the game is boring or anything, it's actually quite the opposite. The demo is a fun, albeit very tense experience. I think this is best displayed when the demon thing starts getting near the screen that you're on. Like you saw earlier, text begins to border the play area telling you to hide and to not let him see you, but this gnarly audio begins to play too, which progressively gets gritty as the demon is on the screen. You can really tell how much love and effort went into this one, and if you're overwhelmed by the amount of demos in the Haunted PS1 demo disc, this definitely wouldn't be a bad one to start with. When I was a kid, I loved going to arcades. My aunt, who always spoiled me and my brother, would take us on these monthly trips to our local pizza place where we would play games and just hang out for the day, so I think me initially having a nostalgic feeling when playing Janitor Bleeds was completely normal. The goal of Janitor Bleeds is to find tokens so you can play the one working game in this arcade, Janitor Bleeds. It's a really simple game. You're a janitor and you clean up messes, but the game has a really weird way of interacting with the world outside of the arcade cabinet. The missing no-like enemy that's stalking you throughout the entire thing fits the arcade theme pretty well, and the relationship between the arcade machine and the game world is just so creative. It's of course scary, but none of the scares feel cheap, which is a common trend I noticed throughout the entire demo disc. I went into this whole demo disc with no idea what to expect, and I was afraid that there was going to be a lot of unnecessary jump scares, which wasn't the case at all, a big relief for somebody who's jumpy like me. Anyways, Janitor Bleeds is one that you should definitely try out, with the lights off of course. When I first started up the haunted PS1 demo disc, the first few games that I played were awesome, but they were also either really terrifying or sad, so when I fired up the third-person survival shooter Pathogen X, I was relieved to find a change of pace. In this one, you kill some mutant zombie things that were seemingly created by a pathogen, and I'm sure that you can see a little bit of inspiration here. The demo only includes this arcade mode where you have to escape an area by navigating through some rooms who are full of mutants. It's really interesting. It has the ammo conservation gameplay of the action-based Resident Evils and the map of a Metroidvania, which makes the decision-making the most interesting part of the demo. Do I want to go straight for the goal and hope that I have enough ammo, or should I go a little off the beaten path in hopes that I find a cooler weapon or some items that'll help me along the way? I really like this one, it seemed pretty polished, but my only gripe with it so far would be that it gives you far too many items for this type of gameplay. That decision-based gameplay that I mentioned gets thrown out the window towards the end of the demo because you'll be drowning in ammo and healing items, which takes away from the tense, thoughtful gameplay. I think a game like this, or at least this mode presented during the demo, would benefit from a difficulty option or difficulty sliders that affect the amount of supplies that you get. But this is just a demo for one mode in the game, so take these criticisms and really any I make in this video with a grain of salt, because who knows, maybe the final release will have these small problems figured out. Anyways, Pathogen X, give it a try, it's pretty fun. One of the best things about the haunted PS1 demo disc is the absolutely insane variety that you're going to find, and Peeb Adventures is a great example of this. It's a third-person platformer where you play as Peeb, this short elephant thing that can grapple around levels, kind of like Spider-Man, I guess? It's quirky, it's weird as hell, and because it's on the haunted PS1 demo disc, you can probably already guess that it isn't as cutesy as its initial impression would give you. I think one thing that made me love Peeb Adventures so much was the music by Lane. It really fits the not-so-serious tone of the game, and the track that plays while you're exploring the castle sounds like something straight out of an old Rare game. Seriously, just so nostalgic. The gameplay has a ton of potential too. You get to explore some creative ideas for the grapple mechanic, but I am just so excited to see what Peeb does in its full release. If it's going to have a full release, please have a full release. There's a lot of little secrets in this demo too, but I'll leave all of that up to you because this is a must-play from the demo disc. Going from Peeb Adventures to the Heilwald Loophole was jarring as hell because the Heilwald Loophole is absolutely the most terrifying game in the collection. Seriously, I hate even looking over gameplay for this one because it got me good. In the Heilwald Loophole, you're stuck in a loop where a creepy doctor tries to chase you down and stick an anesthetic in you so he can remove your liver. And I know I'm probably making this sound kind of silly, but it's legitimately the worst in a good way. It's really creative and polished, and the hide-and-seek gameplay is pretty fun, but I hate it so much. Your goal in this one is to escape the hospital, and the demo has two sections, one in the offices of the hospital and one in the basement with a bunch of neglected patients. It has multiple endings depending on if you die at certain points or escape, but it's ultimately another run and hide from the thing chasing you game. One thing I really liked about this one was the sound design. I mean, the voice of the doctor when you run away from him is super creepy, and the footsteps that you can hear around give you a good indication of where the enemy is at. The doctor and the other talking characters in this one speak really fast, kind of like a sped-up Animal Crossing character, but when you deviate from where they want you to go, their voices turn into this.
Where are you going?
The night after I played this one, I woke up a little bit before my alarm went off and I had to go to the bathroom, and I swear I've never had a more intense walk down the hallway in my entire life. The Salt Order is a game that puts a fun twist on the something is following you in the woods subgenre, which I think is a thing, right? Anyways, in this demo you have to find a key to a door while exploring the woods. You're on a time crunch while you're trying to find these keys too. There's church bells ringing, and if the bell rings 4 times before you find the key and enter the doorway, the demo ends. While you're searching for the key, there's also this demon thing that chases you whenever you look away from it. This forest has a lot of different paths too, so even if you stare down this demon and walk away from it until it's out of sight, it can take a different path than the one that you're on and hit you from the side. And this thing is fast. You're going to be darting around with your mouse a lot, and it'll be stopping right in front of your face, which is terrifying. So yeah, you can imagine that this all adds up to an incredibly difficult experience, but it isn't entirely unfair or impossible, because your character is able to draw lines of salt on the ground to block off certain paths. So you can draw a line of salt on the ground in front of the demon if it's on a narrow path, so when you look away from it, it has to take a different path to try and get you, most of which take a lot longer than the one that it was currently on. It's a cool gameplay mechanic, but it does have its flaws. Sometimes I would draw salt along a path and the demon would find the tiniest little gap to go through, which made it feel a little unfair. Maybe I just didn't understand the rules of this one right, and I know it's just a demo, but for the full game I would love to see a starting level that's a little more forgiving and introduces these mechanics a little bit more. So yeah, pretty cool demo, just hard to pick up at first. Also, quick side note, I love the opening for this game. It starts off in this kind of creepy castle, but it looks more like a low fidelity Pixar movie. Seriously, super cool. So the Haunted PS1 demo disc is really cool because of the amount of freedom it gives you. Choose whatever demo you want to try out in any order. When I got to a new floor in the demo disc, I would usually start by looking at each game's description, and I have to say that Agony of a Dying MMO definitely had the coolest pitch. Live out the last 12 hours of an MMO before its servers shut down is just such a unique concept for a game, and playing through it was interesting. As you start up the demo, you'll quickly realize that this game meant a lot to the people playing it. You have friends online with some unresolved beef, there's a mysterious rumor about a character named Adam, and creepy stuff starts happening to players in real life once they hit level 99. On paper, it all sounds super interesting, but in this 15-minute demo, it's information overload. It has this vertical slice structure where you don't really play one specific part of the game, it just jumps around to different parts of the game while trying to give some context into the story. The cuts between the different parts of the game aren't that smooth either. I mean, you'll switch from a 10-second section to a longer, more open section to an on-rails part where you're in a car sulking with your friend for about 5 minutes of this 15-minute demo. My favorite part of this one was when you were in a larger map and you got to explore, and when you walked by characters, they would say something to you, kind of like this.
This area is off limits, so fuck off.
I feel like this whole thing would have been a lot more engaging if you were able to just explore a larger area of the game and then a video played at the end giving you more context into the story or something. Or maybe the actual game is going to have this kind of structure, and this isn't just unique to the demo, which if that's the case, I just don't think this one was my thing. Risu, a third-person adventure horror game, takes place in a school, and the objective of the demo is to navigate past this weird stuff blocking a staircase. You don't get much story in this one, but you do get a general idea of what the gameplay is going to be like. You know the drill, explore the environments, find the items, and then use or combine them with stuff until you find something else that helps you progress. One thing that really stands out with this one is the camera work. As you enter a new room, the game does a smooth transition over the area, either by quickly panning in and out, or by giving you a bird's eye view of the new environment. This kind of presentation is really satisfying, and I can imagine it would make the more frustrating parts of these types of adventure games a little more bearable. But the most interesting part of Risu is the insanely cool boss battle that plays at the end of the demo. You have to see it, just watch. The design, the build-up, the music, it all adds up to this intense moment in a game where all you've really learned is how to walk and use stuff. But as the boss attacks you, the demo just ends, which I guess is a good thing. Demos are supposed to get you hyped for a full game, and I definitely left this one wanting more. I really wish we could have gotten a little more of this boss fight, but overall, Risu looks like it's going to be a solid game. Protagoras Bleeds is a game that I thought was called Pythagoras Bleeds, which made it super confusing when I was trying to find more info on the game after playing the demo. I have no idea what's wrong with me, but this game's pretty cool. It's a third-person Silent Hill-esque game with some detailed environments and cool cutscenes, but what I absolutely adore about this one are the insanely unique character portraits. Like seriously, look at this. The demo has your character skipping town and exploring a hotel after your car breaks down. It has a lot of surprises and cool little details thrown about. I mean, I didn't really expect to switch to a first-person point of view when you eventually get a room at the hotel, but it was a welcome change. This one also does a really good job of looking like an actual PS1 game. I mean, they've got it right down to the abstract save screen. It's pretty tough too. Navigating with the tank controls isn't the easiest thing in the world, and figuring out where to go next can be a challenge, but it has a lot of promise. I'm excited for this one. It should be cool to see what the final game is like. The Chameleon is another great example of the variety that you're going to find on the demo disc. It's a stealth game where you play as the definitive 80s cool guy, Dr. F. In it, you're trying to escape an underground research facility guarded by these robotic beings who have obviously gone a little rogue. The gameplay starts off with your standard stealth fare of crouching behind boxes and sneaking past enemies, but as you progress, you quickly realize that this game gets its name because you can turn into one of these guards for a short amount of time. It's more tense than scary. I mean, you can only look like a guard for a few seconds at a time, so you kind of have to plan out your routes and find the most efficient way of getting around. You also have a punch attack in your arsenal that has a cooldown timer shared with your transforming ability, which can make for some fun moments. My only gripe with this one would be that there really isn't any penalty for getting caught by the guards. You just go back a tiny bit and sometimes the enemies don't respond, so going in and punching one of them, dying and then running back and punching the one who hurt you is a cheesy, viable option. It was fun though. I mean, I'm excited to see what the developers end up doing with all the mechanics in the final game. Definitely has some potential. A lot of the horror that I've played lately outside of the demo disc has had a first-person point of view, so when I went into the demo disc, I had this weird baseless assumption that almost all of these games were going to be first-person. Anyways, this is just a weird segue into me saying that Echostasis is a first-person horror game, and I really enjoyed it. You see, this one starts off deceptively simple. The opening puzzle is just you raising two latches to open a chapel door, but once you open the door, you're presented with this really pretty scene. From there, the facade is broken, along with any assumptions you may have had with Echostasis. It has some twists, it has some turns, I didn't expect a lot of it, and you know what? I'm just not even gonna go into it. You gotta play it. My thoughts are, I love it. Play it right now. Another first-person demo that I really enjoyed was Loveland. It's a game that takes place inside of a dingy trailer park, which is something I'm surprised I haven't seen yet, but Loveland does a great job with the setting. Loveland Cove isn't your average trailer park though. It has some missing people, and as you gather information on what might have happened to them, the game starts to get really froggy. The whole game is tied together with this red tint that makes the more well-lit outside environments stunningly creepy and gives the shadows inside of the darker sections of the demo a bit more contrast. This filter gives the game a unique sense of style. I mean, most of the 3D models are pretty basic to fit the aesthetic of the demo disc, but it makes Loveland stand out from the others. Its story, which is told mostly through little notes, is really interesting too, with some tense moments while you're creeping around the trailers. These moments are hardly ever met with a genuine scare in the demo though, which was a little disappointing because there's just so much build-up through the noises that you hear while you're exploring the trailers and the little notes that give you some context into the very messed up things that are going on here. But I'm sure that Loveland will have no issues in that department when it eventually releases. I'm excited for this one. So tMod is a demake of Garry's Mod, the classic sandbox where you can spawn 3D models, manipulate them, and play custom games. And I'm sure tMod is pretty cool if you put a good amount of time into Garry's Mod back in the day. I mean, the nostalgia factor from something like this would definitely be there, but I didn't really play a whole lot of Garry's Mod when I was a kid, so it just wasn't there for me. But it isn't just a demake. From the start, you can tell that there's a game to be explored and there's some creepy stuff going on. I just couldn't figure it out. I eventually ended up looking up some gameplay just to see the whole thing playing out, and it seemed pretty cool, but I think I might not be the target audience for this one. Not a bad demo per se, I just didn't know what to do. So yeah, that's all I got. Fiend's Isle, the first-person roguelite of the demo disc, is tough as hell. In the game, you explore the Fiend's Isle, a dangerous place full of slime, skeletons, and traps that are less than forgiving. There's multiple weapons, items, and a few different enemies, with an ultimate goal of unlocking a door at the end of the demo. I really like the first-person melee combat that accompanies this one, and I know that there's a PS1 game that it's inspired by, but I just can't remember the name of it. It seems like a cool concept, and I'm sure that if it's fleshed out with some story and a bigger island, it'll be quite the game. Seriously, there's a lot to be expanded upon here, but the demo's lack of variety to the environments and the enemies leaves a lot to be desired. It has potential, and it's going to be cool to see how the final product turns out. So, like I've mentioned earlier, before you start a game on the Haunted demo disc, you have a chance to read a brief description of what it's going to be about, with its content warnings and credits to the developers. In The Drowning Machine, a game found on the first floor, shows the following. Before my best friend's passing, we began working on a game together. These excerpts are all I have left. In his honor, it's time to finish that game. So going into it, you can already tell that this is going to be a deeply personal experience, and the whole thing is based off a true story of somebody very close to you taking their own life. If I had to bundle it with a genre, I would say it's first-person narrative with some exploration here and there, but it's obvious that the main focus is the story. As you progress, you start receiving texts from some of your buddies who are understandably worried about a friend that they haven't heard from in a while. I don't want to spoil too much, but unfortunately parts of the poetry and the narrative are lost through some confusing transitions. I mean, during this part, I thought I ran into a bug or something. There's also a few parts where the text begins to overlap with what's on the phone screen, making it a challenge to catch some of the material on the bottom of the screen before it disappears. Thankfully, most of these issues are only really present in the third movement, with the fourth being a little more engaging. The game is in black and white too, which really fits the tone it's trying to convey. I mean, seriously, some of these environments are so good. I especially love the little train that you can see going by super fast during this one section of the demo, and when the other train came by, I think I had my volume up really high because it made me jump super bad. The Drowning Machine is a game that I think would benefit really well with some voice acting, maybe a narrator reading the poetry on the screen as you explore the levels, which I know is a big ask for a small indie game, but it was just a thought I had while I was playing it. I've personally dealt with having a loved one take their own life too, and although this demo might not be the most polished thing in the world, I really connected with it. It looks like it's still a little early in development, so I'm so excited to see how the final product turns out. You wake up in a creepy mansion, and you only have 30 minutes to find your way downstairs is a very interesting premise that you'll be going for during the demo for the Lunar effect. I'm a fan of time demos, the ones where you either get to play the game for a certain amount of time or where you have to complete the demo before the time's up, but it definitely has to be done right for it to work. Time trial demos where you get to play the full game for like a half an hour or so usually don't work because the opening of most games include, world building, introductory story beats, and gameplay tutorials that pay off during the rest of the game. Thankfully, the Lunar effect frames this time limit with a note that you find, including an excerpt that reads, "Should you run out of sand, out of moments, you will know exquisite, inconceivable suffering." This makes it so the time limit isn't just saying, hey, this is a demo, but instead bakes it right into the story. And who knows, maybe this is how it's going to be during the final release of the game too, but either way it works. So yeah, in this one you're going to be solving puzzles to get to the ground floor of a mansion. Most of the story is told through notes that you find and item descriptions, but man, this one really shines with its environments. The mansion is detailed as hell, and you only really get to explore the second floor, so I can only imagine that the remainder of the game is going to look just as good. This one does suffer from the old school survival horror problem of having to interact with everything until you eventually find a puzzle to solve or a random item. It doesn't really push you in the right direction at points, but other than that, it looks really promising. Still Ridge is a PT-inspired demo, which, if you don't know, was the demo for a new Silent Hill game that eventually got scrapped. Still Ridge, Silent Hill, it's a pretty clever name. In the demo, you play as a man who keeps on having the same dream, starting with him in a dark room full of bugs and eventually looping through a hallway over and over again. It has a lot of puzzle solving and a cool inventory system where you can click and drag to inspect the items that you have, kind of like the way you can inspect your items in Skyrim. Or, I mean, it would be cool if it worked at all for me. It took me a while to spin around the wallet at the beginning of the game, which I thought was maybe just me doing things wrong, but once I tried moving the dial on the radio that you can find in the hallway, I just couldn't get it to do what I wanted. I restarted the game, restarted the whole demo disc, I just couldn't get it working. Outside of that gripe, I'm sure Still Ridge is a cool game. I ended up just looking up a playthrough of this one, and it looked like the person playing it wasn't having the same problem, so maybe it's just my mouse with this game. Definitely still give it a go if you download the demo disc. The story seems interesting and maybe you won't have the same problem, and it's cool to have a little bit more context, or at least fan-made context, into the PT story. If you know me, you know that one of my favorite games of all time is Mirror's Edge. There's some nostalgia factor there. I've beaten the game a few times with a few different friends, but its gameplay is just so unique and rewarding, it's hard to not at least appreciate the risks that it took. With that being said, I think it comes as no surprise to anybody that has already played the demo disc to find out that I loved Lorne's lure. In this one, you play as this robot AI thing that has been trapped in this underground industrial maze of pipes and metalwork. At its core, it's a parkour and rock climbing game and a creepy map, and I just can't wait to play the full thing. I think this is one of the ones I spent the most amount of time on. The fast movement almost makes it feel like an old school FPS, and the platforming is unforgiving as hell. I mean that in a good way too. The game respawns you very quick, so even though every mistake feels fair, it doesn't get boring. It has a lot of room for the gameplay to open up too. I mean, even through the demo, you find an item that completely changes the way the game is played. My only fear with this one is that the climbing picks that you find do slow things down a little bit compared to the gameplay that you find at the start of the demo, but this could be improved by other items that you might find later on, or clever level design that still encourages fast gameplay and uses the climbing picks as something to save yourself after a risky jump rather than a way to navigate to higher places. I was also a little annoyed with the music towards the end of my playthrough, but it's a demo, so I have high hopes for a AAA fully orchestrated OST alongside it. I'm kidding, but like, can you imagine? Come on, that would be so cool. Either way, I'm excited to see how this game turns out. Really good job. I've said it before, but the variety of games in this demo disc is really what makes it so incredibly fun. You're not just getting a bunch of first-person explore the woods and find the notes games, you're getting course-driven platformers like Toree 3D. Man, this game is so goddamn cute. In this demo, you play as Toree, and you get to hop through 2 rooftop platforming courses full of enemies, obstacles, and little collectible stars. The aesthetic, the way Toree runs, the little noise that they make when they fall on the ground, the ranking system when you beat a level, they all add up for a really charming platformer. But from the very beginning of the game with this Grim Reaper looking guy, you'll start to realize that not everything is as it seems. The graphics start glitching out, and this Grim Reaper guy makes another appearance, but you don't get the biggest look into the horror elements in Toree 3D. It gives you just the perfect amount to be a little curious about how it's going to pan out in the final game. This one is already out too on the PC and Switch for just $1, so yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to give it a go as soon as I'm done with this video. We're gonna continue on the cute game train by taking a look at Ghastly Goodies, a game which has the most charming aesthetic ever. I mean, seriously, I wish I just waited until Halloween to play this one because, come on, just look at that. It's so cool. So in this one, your parents drop you off in front of a scary castle-looking place to trick-or-treat, and there's a free candy sign, which is perfect. You'll be spending most of the demo solving puzzles with the occasional chase, but it really does such a spectacular job of nailing this cartoony tone it was going for. Just listen to the spooky music that plays throughout the opening level. The aesthetic is just so good. It has a ton of potential with the gameplay too, so it's going to be cool to see if the final product takes a more dark turn or if it sticks with the more cutesy aesthetic it's going for in the demo, but big props to the developers on this one. Seriously, it looks awesome. The first thing I thought of when I started up Mummy Sandbox was Crazy Bus, that one weird, unlicensed game for the Sega Genesis. It has a theme that is equally unhinged, but the difference between these two is that the theme kind of fits Mummy Sandbox. It's not the prettiest game in the world, and it's not trying to be. I mean, you can even tell from the super blurry text at the beginning that its art style is very different. And now that I wrote that and said it out loud, it sounds a little condescending, but I mean it. The art is good, but gross. Kind of like an older Nickelodeon show, like, you know, Ren and Stimpy. But let me backtrack a little bit. So I started up this game, got through the opening, and then I really wasn't sure what to do. It seemed like my camera was just looking at the skybox, and although I could move around, there was no direction. My mouse wasn't doing anything. I looked up another gameplay video on YouTube, and I learned that this is not how the game is supposed to start, so I gave it a quick reset, and bam, I was in, I could move my camera. So, in Mummy Sandbox, you play as a piece of red cloth trying to become a mummy. The gameplay loop is to dig up stuff, find remains, and then throw the stuff that you found at the remains while trying to get more items to upgrade your mummy. It sounds pretty cool on paper, but it was just really tedious. The digging is really slow before you get any upgrades, and you have to dig a lot before you get any upgrades. There really isn't much direction for the player either. I mean, how was I supposed to know what items to throw at what characters? How was I supposed to even know that I was supposed to throw items at the characters? I tried my best to finish most of the demos in this collection, but I ended up getting stuck on this one and just didn't have much motivation to finish. So yeah, cool art style, but the gameplay just wasn't my thing. If you watch my last few videos, you'll know that I have a soft spot for labor of love RPG Maker games, and it's easy to say that an Outcry falls right into that category. This one has a lot of contributors, but I think it's so cool that it's being written by Quinn K, who originally translated the cult classic game Off into English, and the experience here definitely shows the writing is just so good. It starts off with the Unnamed, the character that you play as looking for a cigarette and a lighter. Throughout this sequence of trying to find the cigarette and the lighter, you get to meet some of the inhabitants of the apartment building you live in, some of which are really sweet, kind of sad, and a little old school. Most of the demo has you exploring this apartment complex along with an outside area, but I promise I'm being kind of vague for good reason. It has some cool surprises and some awesome art that you just have to see for yourself. Unlike some other RPG Maker games, it doesn't look like this one's going to have a turn-based battle system, but is instead going to focus on the narrative with some light puzzle solving. Again, this is for sure one of the demos that I don't want to spoil too much on, so go play it, it's super cool. So there's two types of demos that you're going to find on the Haunted PS1 demo disc. Demos where the developer gives you a small slice of the game to try out, or ones where the developer took multiple slices of the game and put them together, kind of like Agony of a Dying MMOs. That which gave chase opted for the multiple slices option. This is risky because you either have to make the demo into multiple levels or create transitions between the parts that you're going to show, which can be a little confusing to the player who hasn't experienced your game outside of this small snippet. But that which gave chase pays off from this risk by a lot. The game has you leading a pack of dogs who are leaving a sled occupied by yourself and one of your friends, family, I'm not too sure who this person is. But what I do know is that the desolate, snowy environments are unsettling by themselves, even during the daytime, so when the game quickly shifts to a nighttime segment, it starts to get a little intense. The demo maintains these perfect transitions throughout its entirety. You'll play through a minute or two and then it'll just jump to another section. You never see it coming, but it almost always works. It's also designed to give you really good clues as to where you should be going. For example, during the few sledding sections, the environment seems so open like you could go anywhere. But at some points you'll be quickly cut off by some steep hills if you stray too far, making the game funnel you into the right direction. There's also a part where the demo cuts to your character holding a gun in the woods. This transition might be confusing at first, but you start to hear the howling of a dog and an arrow appears, giving the player an indication that your dogs have gone loose. I like it, the demo was really clever and the atmosphere was the perfect mixture of cozy and creepy. I can already imagine myself playing through this one on like a chill Sunday night, and I'm so excited for it. This was the first game that I played when I started up the demo disc, and it really set some high expectations. Apolysis is a third-person game that takes place in a red-tinted industrial factory that progressively gets more unsettling. Little blurbs of text appear across the screen as you wander around the factory, giving you insight into the character's thoughts, but ultimately you probably won't have any idea what's going on during this one. But that's okay, because the environments are just stunningly cool. From the beating heart at the beginning of the demo to the meat grinder room that I just kind of named myself, you'll have no shortage of fun peeking inside of this creepy world. I would love to see a little bit more gameplay in this one in the full release, maybe some light puzzle solving, because it really is just a showcase for these environments in the demo, but I'm sure that we'll see more when Apolysis eventually releases. Whenever I see a horror game or movie that starts with a character in a car, I automatically assume that it's going to crash. So I was pleasantly surprised when, in Chasing Static, you quietly park at a diner and make small talk with the waitress inside. While you're talking to the waitress, she quickly agrees to give you directions to your destination if you can give her a ride home, but then some creepy stuff happens and then you do crash your car, I knew it. There's some forest exploration that follows the opening scene, but what I really enjoyed about Chasing Static was how it subverts your initial expectations. This opening car scene makes you think that something bad is definitely going to happen. I mean, you're driving so fast, you're just exploring the car while doing so, and it's raining pretty bad. Then, when you go into the diner and start talking to the waitress, you expect something creepy to happen almost immediately after you're done talking to her, but instead the scene drags on, letting you explore the diner for a little bit and grab some coffee. It's such a stellar opening scene, and when something scary actually does happen, the payoff is just so good. And this can be said about a lot of the games in the demo disc. They all take some risks. I mean, there's not a safe, corporate-friendly AAA gameplay moment here. It's so commendable. As I've gotten older, one thing I found myself doing is talking about games or reading about games instead of actually going in and playing them, so going through so many small bits of creativity has almost revitalized my love for the hobby. It sounds a little cheesy, I know, but I mean it. This demo disc was such a daunting effort by a group of creatives who deserve all the recognition in the world. If you're watching this and you haven't tried out the 2021 Haunted PS1 demo disc, I think you really should. It's free and there's even some secret games that I haven't covered, so I didn't quite spoil everything for you. I'm also super hungry, and I've been recording this for a while, so I'm gonna go grab some food.